How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Good, thanks. Good to see you.
Yeah, it's good to see you. How you been?
Can't complain, man. I can't complain. Living the
Yeah.
dream. Yep. Should
Yeah.
change my hat so we don't look like we're both supporting Hurley.
Yeah, I noticed that. I've got one too.
Part of the uniform.
There you go. Yeah, I know. I don't think I've ever met a trainer who doesn't have a plethora of hats.
Cargo pants.
Yeah, that's exactly what I have on.
So tell me
Yeah.
about tell me about your podcast. Like, what are you guys doing, and what are you hoping to accomplish with it? And and then fire away.
Yeah, absolutely. So, it was just kind of an idea. I mean, obviously everyone's doing podcasts nowadays, and so I thought, what can I bring to the table? What's my unique little whatever? And I noticed here in the Northwest, Pacific Northwest, it's not that there's not a lot of people doing it, but there's not a lot in this sector. And not only that, there's not a lot of like information coming
And by
out.
doing what you mean, like the psychology side of things?
Yeah, there's not a lot of like dog behavior psychologists or even human psychology, all that stuff. There really isn't a deep uh amount of information about it. So I thought, maybe get people on and then all the creative like spin-offs of that. So things like you've got, clients and their testimonies on what it's like to, see a trainer go through that whole, this is how you take care of the dog. This is how you actually give them what they need, not what you think. And so, um, other people hearing from trainers is one thing, but I think hearing people's like start to finish transition and then not only sharing that, but also sharing the trainer side of it, their emotional side of it, which I think is really important because I think oftentimes, we go through all these cases and it takes a toll on you, and so I think just being super transparent and showing that is really important.
Oh, I agree. That's one of the big factors in longevity. One of the big factors in enjoyment over time is learning how to. I was talking to somebody the other day. It was a pretty serious conversation. She's talking about maybe needing to put her dog down. She was a psychologist, so it wasn't like she didn't understand the whole thing, but she was talking in the conversation about how overwhelmed she was. Husband with going through emotional issues like PTSD, and there was a lot of things you could hear in the way she was talking about it. And I described it as a pizza. I go, I've only got so many slices in this pizza. And
Yeah.
after that, I'm going to have my way. I go through it. Everybody goes through, some people get sad, some people get mad, some people want to, everybody goes through it, but I'm going to go through it. So
Yeah.
part of what I've learned as I've gotten older is how to balance things out. My business has done this too, is I've gone real hard and then I pull back and then I go real hard at it. I pull back for that very reason, because I think it's easy to get burned out. You're taking on other people's issues, and sometimes it's severe human issues and it's mild dog issues. So you're always taking on something. If it's a severe dog issue, you're taking that on, and then you're overly empathizing with the human. But it's a great point, and learning to balance that will mean a lot. Working with dogs is great, but that side matters. Caretaking.
Yeah, filling your own cup too. I absolutely agree. There's I have a case, or I had a case almost 2 years ago now. I couldn't read it at first. It was a standard. Yeah, my dog's got some behavior problems. Just overly excited, kind of reactive. Rottweiler, and so did the thing. Got through it, and then all of a sudden, our girl starts bringing the dog in. I'm like, well, who is this? Because we have daycare and boarding as well. And so, all was great for a few months. And all of a sudden, this girl starts bringing him in. I'm like, okay, well, are you familiar with the training? Like, do you need? Well, I'm actually the wife. I was like, oh, I didn't know he was married. Like, well, he wasn't. This dog is the reason we split up. And I was like, uh-oh, so here we go. And then after a while, found out it was actually her dog. Um, and then I found out. So I'm working with it. I'm like, hey, let's get the training in because I started to see that decline. And
An ex-wife?
yeah, so it was an ex-wife, and then they were getting back together because the dog had massive improvements. And then come to find
And
out,
why they broke up for the dog? What was the dog doing? Was it aggressive towards her?
yeah, it started reacting over
But
affectionate.
not but not him.
Not him. No.
And so he wasn't. And why did it make her mad? Because she wasn't, or he wasn't taking it serious.
So I'll actually get to that because I thought it was kind of a more typical case, but it ended up being far worse. So the dog started digressing, and I was like, "Hey, let's do a free tune-up. I'll help you guys out. It's no big deal. Like this thing happens, life happens." And it kept getting pushed out, and eventually, I get a phone call from both of them, and they said, "Hey, we need to rehome the dog." And I was like, and they were like, they were really sad and they were crying, like, "It's not you. You've done everything. It's been great. We're just not able to." And I was like, let's have a sit down because it just didn't make sense. Something was off. And so she came in that night and told me, she goes, what had happened was she had a stillborn, and the week later she had gotten this puppy. And when the dog, because she'd given so much affection, the dog had no boundaries, no structure, and so it was just overly excited, super reactive, and she had just told me, she goes, I'm not. I want this dog to have a better life. I want this dog to succeed, and I'm not in a good place. Like all of a sudden, they shifted the blame away from the dog and onto herself. She goes, I'm the problem. I see that now talking to my husband and the training that you've done. I see that, you know, I kind of manifested this, and I shouldn't have this dog. And I said, it was a 3 hour conversation, and it was pretty bewildering. And so, we found it a great home. That was their choice at the end of the day. And, it was, I didn't see that coming, oftentimes you see cases where it's like, it could have been something, frustration created the husband and wife dynamic, but that I just didn't see that. And that was the first time I ever heard anything like that. So
Well, I think things like that are happening more often behind the scenes than maybe the people are telling you. It sounds like you had some
yeah.
open clients,
Yeah. No, yeah. Things like that happen all the time. Yeah. It just depends on the people being able to be perceptive to it, and open to communicating. But
Yeah, I'm going, just had something similar, with somebody whose son, instead of husband and wife. So the son is like, hey, the dog's got to go or I don't come back in the house type of thing,
yeah.
and it's always a similar situation where somebody, if you need a dog, when you get a dog, if you need a dog, every single time you're gonna pay a price.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think that's one of the smallest things. So as humans, we need to be accepted. There's a need that we have, a sense of belonging, a sense of feeling loved, accepted by others. For some people, maybe it's a top need. So other people maybe like three down, four down, but it's never lower than that. Like
Yeah.
everybody has this drive.
Yeah.
And I think it's easy to agree that dogs bring that probably easier than anything else, more than any human relationship, more than anything. Like, because your dog makes you always feel, that's the whole unconditional part of what we explain from them. And I think if that is an underlying motivation for your ownership or in the relationship, the innate sense of the dog is to fulfill it, but then they have to tell you what to do in it.
Yeah.
Because you're starting the dynamic with, hey, I need something from you first. And if it gets that down, that core, that like that deep into your psyche, I have found over time it becomes very, very difficult for people coming from that place to properly use the structure. So we're always complaining as dog trainers, well, why don't you use the structure and such and such? And as you learn more about human psyche and psychology and behavior, we're all motivated by things. And over time, I've taken in so much little information and nuance that you realize why. And
Yeah.
you realize that some people, it's not that they don't want to or they can't. It's that on a deeper level, unless they understand it or are able to address it, the motivation of having this dog in your life will prevent you from being able to have a dog that you can control, because it won't let you establish those rules, boundaries, and limits. It will always prevent that. And from there, everything just falls apart. So it's
Yeah.
this fine line of being super emotional to connect with the dog, but then a bit aloof enough so the dog's like, shit, how does this work?
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
such a fine line.
And that I almost had like the opposite effect before I came to TCW. I had 7+ years in caring for people with special needs. And so that whole industry, especially like during the COVID time, it it had just destroyed any kind of mental fortitude I had. I had, gone through the ringer and back for these clients, and really it's a selfless job. You don't really get any high praise either from high or low. So you kind of have to really be confident in yourself and your abilities and know that what you're doing is for a greater good. And I lost my way. And it was funny when I think it was just at some point I decided I need to find something not, human psychology related. And I had done a lot of like dog training on the side. It was always kind of a passion. I want to say more of a hobby. I made some money at it, but it wasn't like I had like a business and a career out of it. And so I was really blind to all the nuances that is like training business and I don't want to say the red tape, but there is kind of a deeper inner workings, and so I I had looked up and saw TCW, and I thought, well, this seems like something. I read all the testimonies, and it seemed like something, changing my life. And I was like, I need something like that, or like Rhythmia, something that can profoundly shift my sociology because it was broken. And so
What
um
kind of what kind of people were you helping?
so they were high functioning people with like autism, ADHD, and like fetal alcohol syndrome, things like that. So really, um, troubled individuals. They were high functioning enough to be in society, but because their decorum was so lacking, they
Yeah.
needed that guidance. So it was kind of like dog training for people in a big way. It was kind of like correcting the nuances, and my retention rate was the highest in the state of Oregon.
Wow. That's
And
my wife. When I first met my wife, she worked for a company called Project Independence, and she did that. She helped you just explain basically the same thing where it's you're you've got enough mental incapacity that you couldn't do it on your own, but you have enough capacity that you can be out living in an apartment. But you have to have somebody
yeah,
check up on you, and the most crazy stuff, like you couldn't show up at this guy's house with an open toe shoes because he would just start rubbing one out to your feet.
yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
yeah,
some
weird
people
stuff.
you'd have to
Yeah,
lock the refrigerator because they would open it up and eat a pound of ground beef just in
yeah.
the middle of the night with their hands and
Or
stuff.
cologne, yeah, yeah. So that what you
It's
described as a
taxing, dude. That line of work is any caregiver fatigue is real shit. And when it
burnout.
gets deep
Yeah.
like that, because those people don't have a lot of they don't understand empathy. It's not like they're doing anything wrong, but they don't understand like what they're doing can pull from other people.
Yeah, they don't rationalize. Yeah, they
Right.
they they absolutely can't. No. And well, I actually did. So I did caregiving from 2011 to 2015, then became a
Okay.
foster care provider. And it was always high functioning. I did APD for a little bit, so it's like taking care of elderly and all that. What it sounds like your wife did was more of a PSW. So it's kind of like a brokerage system, more of
Okay.
a uh you go to an apartment and maybe the apartment has like 15 of those types of individuals.
Um,
And
Not quite so much. It would be like they would definitely live maybe with one or two roommates, but maybe like you or I would live in a roommate
right,
situation. But maybe I don't know what's I don't know if it's done like on a functioning scale or how
yeah,
much assistance is needed. She comes from a psychology background as well.
yeah,
Um, but she got
it
paid
varies.
very, very little. I mean,
Mhm.
she made nothing,
Yep.
like less than $10 an hour, I remember.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and that's the reality. As a provider, you can make a lot more, but the problem is now the state's on you because
Okay.
it's government, it's basically a government contract. You're contracted out, and they're coming down you to say, well, what can you do better? Because if a client messes up, they're protected, and it means that when someone messes up, and whether or not be them or you, it's always you. So you got double the shit coming down, and then they're also, where's my ice cream, because you said yesterday, and it's just you're never doing anything right, and it's very taxing. And so yeah, I just needed to get away and reset. And what's funny is when I did go to TCW, I knew like all the fundamentals of what you guys were saying. Like I heard and understood. I could not physically get myself to apply it anymore. I had such a weakened self-esteem that anything and everything I did. Like I was hiding myself. I had, really broken myself down. And, I remember at the hotel room and you said, this will change your life. Like there's been people who've said, they've gone on, got divorced, changed careers, everything. And that spoke to me. And I said, okay, I'm gonna be open to this. I'm gonna let whatever this is, I'm gonna be open to it. And it was profound. And yeah, it changed my whole life. And I'm thankful for you. I've talked to Cesar about it. He's, super thankful for just everyone on the team. It was life changing.
That's awesome to hear. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
So what part of the dog world do you occupy now? What is it that you do? What do you form your business around?
So I've always had a propensity for the behavioral, the reactive, the aggressive. Just I don't know if I was just wired differently. I just I watch things like Ginger Grand and or Temple Grand, sorry. And always kind of I've always asked the question why. When I see something, I go, why is that? And so, I started this business 2 years ago. I bought a company actually from a previous owner, and it was not dilapidated, but it was kind of one of the weaker kennels in Oregon. And I thought I'm gonna fix it up. I'm gonna make this my project. I'm gonna put myself into it and really. And so we do everything. We do grooming, boarding, training, and daycare. And
What part from a business standpoint, what part brings in the most revenue?
Mostly boarding, because there's, that's the most you could pay for. So boarding, last year we made about, I'd say it's
You
about
don't have to. You don't have to.
60%.
You don't, I was gonna say you don't have to say
No,
your
no,
number.
I'm not. No, no, it's about 60% boarding. About 15% training. We didn't do a bunch of grooming last year. So it kind of varies.
Do you
We've
not
tripped.
push? Do you not push grooming, or is it just that people in that area don't do a lot of grooming on their
No, they
dogs?
do. They do. So, kind of like training, we only do one at a time. And mainly because we take in a lot of the ones that have been rejected from everywhere.
Oh,
And
gotcha.
so you're like real reactive and, oh, I want to do my dog's nails at home, save $1. And then they're all reactive, So, we
How
do
many
that.
kennels? How many kennel spots do you have?
We have 40 kennels. And from 16 when I originally bought it. So we've renovated a bunch and done a lot of work and all that. We do about 40 is our max for daycare. A lot of people around here have I don't want to insinuate other people, but squirt guns, spray bottles, all that kind of like
Yeah.
old school style stuff is still being done around here. And all we have is sip leads, and it's and just prevention. A lot of it's just teaching my staff. None of them are, you know, just off the street teenagers. I'm actually finding people who have a deep passion for this, and I teach them. This is, the fundamentals, the basic stuff. And to watch, the head hovering over the back, the mouth closed, all those little things that, kind of those precursor warning signs. And so, and we've only had, I think, 2 bites last year, and they were really just not full on contact. It was just an overcorrection probably on the dog's end. So very, very, very proud of that, because the real number of bites is probably a lot higher in most places. So, and that's just from a statistical standpoint. But yeah, it's been incredibly fun. A deep learning curve, because I've worked with, 2 3 dogs at a time, albeit like littermate syndrome something, but I never had it was nice because in the beginning there was only 9 10 daycare, and it was like, okay, we can start small, and they were all regulars, so that all the dogs kind of knew each other. Albeit I knew how to read that dog psychology. It's a different pace when you got 20 30 maybe even 40 dogs in a yard doing the dance. And so, you know it's been fun. I got to learn with the company. I got to say, okay, I can handle a little bit more. I can, I've been really responsible about it, and not just, been overconfident, because I think that can, not only can that damage, your reputation as a business, but the dogs suffer. People can see, the dog was overly stressed or unsure. They come home at the end of the day. So I made sure not to overstep my personal comfort zone.
Well, yeah, that's super important. It's easy to bite off too much in a bunch of different ways when you're handling animals. But doing it a few at a time like that, and the dynamic between understanding a dog or two and understanding a group, with the goal of getting that group to have some type of unity,
Yeah.
is completely different. Now, you know, 20 different interchanging dogs on a daily basis, you're always having to stay very much on point.
Yeah.
If 15 of those dogs are there on a regular basis, they'll come in if you handle them right and tell those other five what to do. But the challenge comes from always on a daily basis having that new mix come in and out.
Yeah.
And I was taught in a pack, so I was educated pack first. And so every lesson that anybody's ever gotten in a dog world, I got in the pack. So I was in a pack of, it ranged from 20 to 30, maybe 35, depending on there was a variation based on dogs that were coming and going. I'd be interested to know the exact number, maybe between 25 and 35. I don't know. But in that experience came, and my mindset's that anyways. Like I like looking at a group of people and breaking it down. And ultimately, when I'm trying to create analogies, I'll tell people it's like looking at a group of people through glass. It's pretty easy to tell. I don't need to know what you're saying. I just need to know how you feel about you. Like, are you about, do you want to ignore that person? Do you want
Yeah.
to go at that person? And how are you going at that person? So it's only a couple of directional moves I need to see and how you feel about it. And if I can process that, you can have a bunch of dogs, and then also have the ability to calm them. There's a daycare I helped a few years back up in Ohio, no, Indiana, and Dog World. I think it was Dog World. Nick Walls, how are
Okay.
you? And they would have like 150 dogs, and they wouldn't even be barking. I have some stuff on my Instagram from back then that was like years ago, and I'm outside, and they may have, it's maybe 70 or 80 dogs outside, and there's people mowing on the other side of the fence, and they managed to keep all the dogs completely quiet. And they would have 80, 90 dogs chugged up at a gate, like in this big area, getting ready to let a bunch of dogs through. And they could open up gates and go grab mops, and all those dogs would stay
Yeah.
right there. And there was some basic fundamentals that they worked on that was impressive, to the point where they were controlling. They had to have had like almost every other dog in this area because it was such a rural area.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And if they were in, like, let's say LA with these type of numbers and the amount of dollars they could charge, it would have been ridiculous. But it was a very, very rural area, very small numbers, but they had a ridiculous amount of very well controlled dogs. I've done some daycare consulting through the years, and that's the most impressed I've been. I walked in and I went, I don't know what you want. I don't, I'm
Yeah.
looking around going, well, this is,
Looks good to me.
I gotta find some shit wrong. And
Yeah.
but if you're doing it right, you can build it up to where there's quite a few dogs that come in and know what to do. They don't have to behave elsewhere. They just have to know how to behave and do things there.
We've had that. Yeah. We've had dogs not potty trained at home, but we potty trained them, and it's just because we have a system, albeit it's still, we're still in our infancy. So we're still like thresholds are still very much a big thing. Like we're teaching, the big thing is the challenge right now we're having is about 3 o'clock. All those dogs, because out of habit, they learn they're going home soon, and so they start to get excited, and then how to manage that. So it's just oftentimes when you correct or adjust one thing, something else will pop up. It's like,
Mhm.
oh, okay, well then this is.
So is your place called the Grand Fur Lodge?
It is, yeah. Granford Lodge came up with it. That's actually Floki, our ambassador. He's about 3 years old, and he helps me with some of our bigger cases. And he's a Chesapeake Bay, so he's a working Chessie. So he's got that intensity. He's got that little bit of uncertainty. They're not like protection dogs, but they
They're
have been
powerful,
known. They're very powerful and they're
powerful
intense.
dogs. Yeah.
Yeah, very, very intense. And he's technically my wife's dog. But I was like, nah, if we're gonna get it, I'm gonna work with it because there's just too much there to not. And then I also have a blue bay shepherd. That's around where you're from. I don't know if you know Vicky Spencer. She's the one who breeds them. It's got a little bit of wolf in it. So
Okay.
definitely a deeper challenge. I wanted to challenge myself and get something. I didn't want to get a Borbell or a Malinois or Anatolian, that just didn't interest me. It's not that first of all, it's been done a lot, but also I just didn't that didn't fit my needs. And so I got
How long have you been working with dogs?
about 10 years. And so I wanted to get more of a back of the pack, very docile, um, blue bay, so I can, help me with some of those more uncertain cases, help because she'll come out and she'll know to kind of help work with me and build that confidence in that other dog. So
I I've never tried to raise a dog to help me, but I've definitely found dogs that can help me.
yeah, yeah,
I adopted one not about maybe a year back for being able to see her do it. Not all of them over the years I've seen have the want for it, and if they do, a lot of times it's a short shelf life. I have dogs that did it great for a little while, and then they don't want to do it. It's a lot of ask
yeah, it is.
to ask the dogs to constantly deal with the unstable energy of other dogs and have
Yeah,
to put up with, it's like bringing somebody around that may hit you consciously,
yeah,
so the
yeah,
dog knows
yeah. Or
the dog knows
caregiving.
you brought them there, that you brought that unstable energy there. And so if you have a couple of bad cases in a row, you got to take some time to let them flush it out, especially if it's a dog that brings a lot of heat their way, because they'll lose a little bit of drive in you because you brought it there to them.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so you have to be real conscientious that some can be super resilient to it, but the ones that have a really strong drive to want to go in and help, again, it changes that the energy stays there, but the drive to kind of help out can shift, and it
yeah,
turns into more of like, I'm just gonna fuck this dog up. And,
yeah.
and so you just again be mindful. It's a big ask, so they have to be flushed out. It's like anything
I
that
do, I
pile on.
do, I do definitely work a lot with confidence building with him. It's definitely something I've noticed that
No,
when
I mean play, like release stuff. So you got to let them not. I don't mean confidence building. I mean since we get our dogs around unstable situations, it's making sure that their life has the exact opposite of that. So I'm an extremely like structured person in very tiny ways that are matter, and then I'm really like fuck it in a lot of other ways. And so my dogs get to benefit from that in a lot of ways. They get the freedom of the fuck it. So I'm not somebody out there
yeah,
giving a lot of direction to try to always make sure my dogs are listening and doing the right thing, because as a trainer it's easy to fall into the that little bit of a trap of needing so much from our dogs that we put a lot of pressure on.
yeah,
We need them to behave, we need them to perform, we need them to help us. So match that with fuck it, where you're not giving them anything, where it's like this big free open field and place to run around is yours. I'm not going to call you back.
yeah,
You know what I mean? I'm going to let you go out and go as far as you want. Now, if you come back to me, hey, there we go, great, and we'll work from there. But it's really, to me, anyways, it's important for all these people that use our dogs to give them that, because I'll tell you something. Over time, I've had eyes on trainer dogs. I have a unique perspective from where I sit. I've seen a lot of dogs from trainers. I can tell you that they're not always the happiest dogs.
yeah,
You know what I mean? And for
yeah,
different
yeah,
reasons. And
yeah,
there's different reasons that feed into that, but they're not always the most. And I'm not free from this. I'm making observations that come not only from observing myself, but from observing what others go through and understand. I'm on my next generations of dogs.
yeah,
So that's why I asked how long you've done it for, because wanting those challenging dogs tends to come from, an earlier generation in your career. And then you realize, all right, I need to put my time in some other things. I can't go into such I don't want to purposely bring in such a challenge.
yeah. You're absolutely right. The first dog I ever had was he was 25% wolf. He was a black shepherd. It was actually my now wife, girlfriend's dog at the time, and he was dog reactive. And so I thought, okay, well, we're gonna. I was trying to impress her. It was like the first time I'd ever messed around with a dog outside of my own. I grew up with a lot of hunting dogs, so I lot of working hunting dogs. So I was very comfortable, confident, overly confident, I think, certainly for the time. And so I did, and I got, a good chunk of the way there. And we never got him perfect, but we got him manageable. And, of course, wife super ecstatic about that. But no, I do know what you mean by the whole fuck it thing, because I have a farmhouse and I only work 3 days a week. That seems to be a good those 3 days I work are really intense, but then it's like done. And so I go and it's on 2 acres and we'll just, I don't ask as much out of my dogs. I still keep, thresholds. Like we're not just gonna go storming through because
Sure.
it'll fall
Yep.
apart. But
Basic.
yeah, structure, some structure. But yeah, no, I'm not like, okay, like I've got a video I'm about to release. We went in the backyard and I let him dig a hole. He started digging. I was like, do it, go for it. And he must have dug for like, he dug till he was tired and he came back up the next day. Like, I'm going back to my hole and I'm gonna dig. I said, go for it, dude. Like, first of all, it's all just whatever land anyway. But and he's got this like little den now. It's like a huge hole and he just loves it, and my other dog, she loves it too. And so, it's just kind of like being able to afford that freedom for them is really rewarding, but also like I grabbed a shovel and I started digging out the loose dirt and let's keep going, if that's what you want to do. And so, but I got to be careful because I do know that like towards the end when he was digging, it became more of like I'm doing it for you, so like he kept looking at me and like I'm gonna keep going. I'm like
Might have been waiting for a limit. You might have been
yeah,
waiting to see, are we done? So as
right,
long as you don't let him go tear ass like that,
yeah,
so that you don't end up with a dog that digs a hole in every yard it goes into,
right,
just make
right,
sure that there's like a conscientious ending,
yep,
right? That was placed by you so that you can decide it. One of the things that I've had students ask over the years is uh, Cesar used to let Junior obsess over the ball. And I even
okay,
remember one class he said, since it had been raining or something like that and he couldn't walk him, that he purposely let him get obsessive with it because it burned a lot of energy, but he would always end it and shut it off
right,
and relax him right there. So no matter how intense you let him do it, that's the secret to letting your dog do dumb shit like that.
right,
And like you said, to say, yeah, man, here you go, let's dig a little bit. But it has to have a conscientious ending. So like when I let my dogs go out in the woods and run around, like I said, they go tear ass through. The last ending steps of that, they go back into a follow mindset.
okay, yeah,
Right. So then the ending is really where the control comes from. And
right,
that's the trick, so that you're not always having to like through those free events, skip, sit, oh, no, come. But your dog doesn't need that. And so you let them
yeah,
have this moment. And you say, okay, I can let my dog have this, but if they go to a 10 and I still want to let them have it, then I might just put something heavy on them or
yeah,
something to slow them down, have them drag, something that slows them down a little bit. And that
right,
way they get to do the same thing, but same purpose, then you end it.
yeah.
And I found it's really helpful. And all my dogs stay super fulfilled and not with a lot of overdoing it.
Yeah, I learned that. I learned that with basic obedience stuff, like just trick training, So like after, we get the paw, we do the body language, just marking all the commands, and then okay, that's enough. And then as I do that, I roll up the bag and we put it away and we're done. And they know, okay, all right. And enough of they don't do the, okay, well, what else? Can I do more? Like all that stuff. And so because I do like to get them hyped up, especially for teaching things like, barking or like speak. And so I just like to kind of, okay, we're done and that's it. And we're gonna go about our day. So yeah, I learned very early on that it was important to mark uh an ending, as you say, a very like I don't want because my whole concern was okay, if I'm gonna ask them to start, they need to be asked to stop because what's to stop them from just always being, and it was trial and error, over time I was like, well, okay, all right, tricks. Now I'm going outside and they're still in that mindset. They're still spinning. They're still, like, oh, they're not done. And then I would give into it, but then I'd learn over time, don't give into it. Just tell them, okay, let's transition. Let's change. Different mode. So
That's great that you caught it, that you could see the pattern.
yeah,
It's those little things, and it'll help you, I'm sure, be a better teacher because you'll be able to help people understand how you saw it. Because
right,
that's the same. I think seeing those patterns are what are difficult for people. But yeah, is once as it was explained to me, you don't take the energy from one event to another. Unless,
right,
I'll use excitement purposefully sometimes, but I'm not going to take a dog. This is like why police dogs in a lot of our interpretation are inappropriately trained in the sense that they train them on and almost keep them on. And so they never really turn those dogs off, as opposed to being able to, hey, I need you now, and then have an ending to it. You don't have to have a dog in a full drive all the time for it to go to a full drive. You have that
Yeah, yeah,
ability.
you could, yeah, yeah,
And so good. That's good that you saw that. Now the thing that for me that's important is making sure that people understand the difference of, just because the dog, is sitting or whatever, I'm looking for them to go back to that more relaxed, submissive surrender state. And that's a clear, that for me is the clear defined ending to them. Now
yeah.
I know they've left whatever that, the rally or whatever thing they were doing over here that was hyper intense. Now I know that they've left that switch is turned off. Now I can take them over here and we're good.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's and I catch that a lot with you know, like you said, police dogs, prime example. That I think it's actually better for them to understand that there is an up and down, that it's not just. I think it allows you to say, it gives you the ability to say, okay, albeit training, you can then bring that into a new unexposed environment.
What questions do you have of any you do for me?
Yeah. So where did you get your start? What was kind of like, for me, it was like 8 years old. I was hunting with my grandpa, learning just kind of the energies and like to calm yourself so that the you don't spook the deer and the elk. And that really fascinated me because the dog would do it too. And then that kind of, that drove me to start asking questions and deep diving. What was that for you? Do you have a moment you're like, this is it?
Dogs?
Yeah, yeah,
No. I can be reflective about behavior in general and remember back from being young, observationally, like you just described with the dogs. I'd always been like that with people and
yeah,
human behavior. Now, I had a dog when I was a kid, but she was in the backyard and didn't walk her enough and all of that.
yeah.
And when I got older, I never had a pet once I moved out. I moved out to California, never had a dog. Um, then my wife and I started dating, and I think right when we got married or right before we got married, we decided to get a puppy, and we got a German Shepherd, same dog I had as a kid. Then we didn't socialize her. She started having real bad behaviors, and that was when I actually contacted Cesar. This would have been like 2007, I think, maybe 2006. And I contacted Cesar to see if he could help because it was in LA. We weren't too far from there, and he wasn't taking clients, but he referred me to this guy named Lynn Boki. And so we took our dog there, and it was this big experience. It was quite intense, and he had people watching. And interesting. Some of these are like the who's who of the doggy world now. Like a lot of people that people go to learn from, all happened to be present back then because they were still working with and learning from Lynn. And when I realized he had students, I was like, huh. Because we were just getting into with getting the dog and dog walking and did some stuff at a shelter. I was like, oh, this is kind of interesting. And I always figured I could learn it due to the behavior side. And I jacked my dog up though. But once I saw this, I went and spent 30 days with Lynn. So I went from not really knowing anything. It's not like I had a philosophy or worked with dogs before. I was a dog owner that fucked their dog up. And so I went, and then I learn it. I read this body language book like front to back 2 or 3 times, and I go, and next thing you know, I'm around 20, 30 dogs looking around. I'm like, oh, I know what that means. I know what that means. I know what that means. And then Lynn brings context to it. And then I start to watch and observe Lynn and what he does and how he does it. For the first 10 days, we weren't even allowed to speak because he's like, the dogs don't talk. So if you need something, figure out how to communicate it. And that was, all these little things are very profound because it introduces you to what the dogs are looking at. Like, I don't think almost anyone takes into account that if you have 3 or 4 dogs in your house, you're being studied by each dog.
Yeah.
Like, you're
Yeah.
literally being studied about the way you interact with each other dog, and you could blow it simply because you interact with the weakest dog the wrong way.
Right.
Even if you do everything the right way, you can blow it because in their world, unless you got a really good established thing, you can't even do that. And so learning how the dogs truly see the world was really important to understanding the dog's point of view before even anything regarding training. And I've never ever really seen it as training. What I see is that I'm trying to create something. I'm trying to like create an activity. Like I did
Hmm.
a post today about putting dogs on a golf cart,
Yeah, I saw that.
right? So it's like the
Yeah.
steps. What are the steps? So it's
Yeah.
going to be, step one, step two, step three, step four. Now, fundamentally, I'm going to be repeating things in those steps. So if I'm trying to take you to something, I'm going to be repeating a fundamental of follow. Once I want to get you onto something, I'll probably bring happy go lucky energy. I now want you excited. Now we're at some place. I want you to go back to calm surrender and go into a waiting state. Now, whatever the activity is, I learn, I figure out what part I need to have there. And then once you take the dog through it like a producer, you then just repeat it. Now that's where to me the training comes into play. So now the once I start to repeat what I'm doing, that's training. Well, I'm on the golf cart every day. So my dogs have a ton of repetition behind this. Well, that little Yorkie's new, so I've taught him to do it. The first time I did it with him, I picked him up and actually set him on the golf cart the very, very first time because I did it on the first day where he sucked with the leash. So I couldn't use the leash as the tool,
Right.
right? So I
Yeah.
pick him up and I set him in the golf cart. And I did it in reverse. So I actually taught him how to be on the golf cart before I taught him how to get on the
How to
golf
get,
cart.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So
And so
gets the program.
as long as I do it consciously, as long as I produce it in the right steps.
Yeah.
So that's what it taught me is a dog needs to know what you expect of them, and you need to know what mindset they're in based on what you're trying to teach them. Right. So if a dog's in avoidance and you don't catch that and you start putting a little pressure on them, how much that's terrible for them, or a dog needs excitement and you're just acting a little bit calm because you think that's the right energy, that won't work. That's the shit that dogs and dog trainers or dog people, that's where your dog really just they open up to you. So anything you do becomes easier to a dog that's open to you.
Right, right. Well, you gotta earn that trust and respect, and that's what I'm doing right now. I just took on a case. He's a Cane Corso Dutch Shepherd mix, and so he's reactive, people reactive, but definitely dog aggressive. And so like he's made contact with dogs, and it's become kind of a habit, and for about a year I've been like, hey, let's get this dog in. Like he comes in, he's an out alone for our boarding. And finally I get a call. He's like, okay, I'm expecting time to get this dog trained. It's like, oh, okay. Well, now that things are changing, you needed to change because no one wants to be faced with the dog or, kid and, obviously the dog. But so that's I just took on that case the other day and that's all I'm doing right now is just building a rapport with him. Just he loves ball. Let's do ball. I've already got the muzzle off, and he took the treadmill pretty good. So I have a manual treadmill. I have both, but the manual one seems to be easier than the automatic one. And so he's already taken to that, and we're probably going to go camping at some point way off in the middle of nowhere and just really build on that relationship and get creative. I think that's the thing where I heard on one of your podcasts, like people go to these like trainers training events where they try to learn from trainers and they try to emulate or imitate. And I think what I not really the issue, but I think for me is I don't want to imitate or emulate. I want to learn like other opportunities or other like ways that worked for them in order to uh add to my tool belt because I'm doing things, albeit the best way. I haven't even introduced slip lead yet. You know what I mean? It's just
Well,
it's not.
I'll go a step for you to the point is if you want to understand why we talk fundamentals
Yeah.
so emphatically, right? You just said something that maybe you did it purposefully, maybe not. You said he likes to play ball, so I've played a lot of ball with him. I want to build this rapport with him. And so Cesar would say, follow, play, explore. Now that is a puppy thing, but it is also the formula behind like the options to create or trigger leadership, and they need all three. You don't have to start just like I didn't start with putting the dog on. Like I didn't introduce him how to jump on. I started by putting him on. right? So
Yeah.
so you can start meeting a dog with play. You don't have to start come out of the gates being a badass.
Yeah.
In
Yeah.
fact,
No,
in
exactly.
some, you
Yeah.
know what I mean? With some cases that in no way, shape, or form is going to help you. Now, in a few rare cases, it's necessary. But if you stick to what motivates, or not even motivates, what the dog enjoys, you're building a relationship. Now, at some point, you're going to have to get respect from the dog if, in fact, the reason they're biting is disrespectful reasons.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do
Right.
you know what I mean? If they're
Yeah.
biting just because they're a little bit nervous and nobody has picked up on the fact that, the dog doesn't want to be doing these things, it just did it out of other chances, then no, that moment may never come to pass.
Right.
You know what
Well,
I'm
he's
saying? So,
definitely he's definitely misunderstood. I've already seen with playing it's not just that. I think being creative within the training, right? So like playing with ball allows me opportunity to tell him no. Like when he goes to reach for ball, I can step in and he's
but
already
the
stepping
point I'm
back.
trying to make is you said, you like to learn from other trainers to know how they go through things. Well, the thing is the reason that you really can get to where you don't need really anything is that if you understand, really use these people like myself to understand the real premise of the fundamental, and you have a behavior just in hearing you, your own creativity will fill the gaps.
Yeah.
It truly, truly will. So if I know going into a situation that I'm going to meet a dog, which one am I going to use? Am I going to use follow, player, explore? Now, if I'm going to use follow, now these are the ways that I might try to do that. I'm going to use a leash. I might go, you know what I'm saying? I might take a moment where I try to bring the dog actually into a little bit more of an unsure
Yeah.
state.
Yeah. Yeah.
How intense the dog is,
Uh-huh.
right?
Yeah.
I know that I'm going for respect first. I know no matter what I'm doing that the creative approach or the choices I'm making are coming out of a desire to need respect in my first interactions.
Right.
Right? So I know automatically I'm taking these categories. Now, if I'm going to go, no, I don't think the dog needs that, then maybe what I'm going to do is take the dog out in the woods and I'm going to let it run around. I'm going to let it explore. I might even do it with it. There's, I guess, Nelson Hodges does that. Part of the class is you run through the woods with the dog and you have to follow it. You have to explore with it and follow the direction it takes you. So owners understand it's not just a one-way street. Yes, you have to make the choices, but what does the dog want to do?
Yeah.
Right now, play is huge. But if I try to use play with a dog that I need respect, oftentimes that excitement leads to an issue.
Yeah.
And so the to me, what I think, and this is where Cesar's brilliance is in his simplicity, is that a couple things he says are literally everything. One is exercise, discipline, affection. I think those are the three strongest words in the dog world when you really and just so you know, I've been doing this for a very long time with Cesar. And even though I might have used those words, I really, 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 really didn't understand it for quite some time.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh yeah, exercise, discipline, affection, and all his threesomes that his little trilogies.
Yeah. Yeah.
I understood it on an intellectual level. I'm a smart guy. I understand behavior. I get what he's saying. I understand that. But it's another thing to get the repetitions in and understand it on a level of, oh, so literally every problem is fixed through the same three words, every one. Now, the discipline, meaning like what rule we're applying, might change a little bit. What are we really going to focus on?
Yeah.
Right? But if I've that little Mighty Mouse dog, that little Yorkie, he has a habit of going through a doorway at like 1,000 miles an hour, and using a leash wasn't effective. It wasn't getting through, and so it goes to a simpler fundamental of not just the boundary at the door, because that's not what he needed. He would come across and then it would go. So
Right.
it was consistently allowing him to move, but to stay in a circle that he moved at a very slow speed, and then I could let him out, let him move, and he would be moving slow. So it was understanding that, again, I'm just using a boundary, right? So
Right.
it's just a simple rule, boundary, a limit. A limit is what we just explained earlier: how much, how long. So if you're letting your dog do something really hyped up, like dig a hole, just end it. So people ask me, should I let my dog do this? And it's like, well, if you allowed him to do it and you end it, I don't care. Whatever you're asking me doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But should I let my dog climb on the? Yes, as long as you allow it and you end it. And that's what I mean by my brain is so free of clutter, because I literally only have like 30 or 40 words in my head. And then yes, and this is where you could get assistance. There are tools in the tool chest that will help you,
Yeah.
but the experience you're going to get. I mean, you're going to have to go through it so that it's meaningful to you. But
Yeah. Yeah. To be
that's what I
profound.
think is he's so good at.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And it's definitely been a steep learning curve in myself, right? So like when, for example, I'm working with a dog and I might have had a bad day or something, and I don't even realize I had a bad day. And I'm like, man, I'm just not feeling it. Like being able to step back, like I'm gonna come back to this later and just not put that on the dog, mainly because it's not going to be effective, but also I don't want the dog associating that with me, right? Especially if it's like a first train or whatever. That first initial has to be done in such a way where I think it's so crucial, because that's, like first impressions are so important. And that's kind of
An imprint too, and
yeah,
absolutely, if you
yeah.
mess up the first, it's very depending on how intense it was. It's very difficult to erase that first repetition. So it's good that you step away if you're not feeling it.
Yeah, and I'm always checking myself now, and the exercise discipline affection, I do when I'm doing dogs, like when I'm doing now, I do get on a more consistent. I have ADHD, so I'm always kind of, struggling with project management and everything. But I hire other people to help me with that. But I do get into a more strict regiment routine with a dog with exercise, right? So I'm making sure I'm physically and I'm not as anxious, right? Like my cortisol levels aren't higher. My dopamine levels are where they need to be. And I'm making sure I'm eating the right food, smoothies and whatnot, more vegetables. And I do see a better effect on my dog training when I am in that state of mind. And so I don't know why I don't have self-respect to do that when I'm not training a dog, but it's that's a whole different thing. But when I do get in that, it's like, it was so funny because when Cesar was talking about, when you're training a horse, you get your stirrups, you get your hat, you get your halter, you're getting into this mode. I've always done that with dogs. It's just kind of like I've always been able to, like, okay, this is a person, this is a dog, and I've been able to disassociate the human aspect of that, so I can be so I can read the dog. It's almost like being bilingual. It's interesting how uh reading dog body language and understanding psychology, I found that it's not really like, it's almost like having a conversation. I said it in my last podcast. It's like having a conversation with someone. You're not thinking actively of what you're saying in the moment. You're just seeing it and you're absorbing it. And you're not thinking, you're just reacting. And I think if you have good intentions and your overall um your fundamentals are in the right place, I think the reaction is going to give a more wanted outcome, right? So it's like I can have the intent of having an aggressive conversation with someone and I'm going to get that back. I'm going to have an argument with someone. Whereas if my intentions are good, I'll see that and it'll be reciprocated.
Well, they say that you get what you put out there.
Right.
We recorded a podcast yesterday, and Lynn said something really good. He said, "I realized that you can't help a dog that has the same issue as you." And he was helping this dog that had real bad food possession, and he was explaining as a kid that he had real bad food possession, and for reasons that he's been open with. And he said at that moment, he was able to work through it. So yes, you are being reflected in your dog. And so if you want control for selfish reasons, you end up being competitive. It's a balance of giving them what they need so they can give you what you want, whatever that might be. Right. And they have their needs, and their needs have nothing to do with you. It's just that we have to be the ones that fulfill them. And
Right.
that's the thing is as soon as you want something more than you're able to provide, and that could be energy at the moment, that could be an overall sense of fulfillment, it's difficult because the animal is always going to just be honest in the way that they communicate back with you. So if you're acting like a dick and you want them to do something they're not sure about and they start to shut down,
Yeah.
dude, that shutdown is you. You're
Yeah.
not honoring that they're unsure, and then they're unsure about you. And that's where, yes, I think they're great at keeping us emotionally honest. But I think too, to something you said, it use that as a motivation so that you provide that same love to yourself even when it's not motivated by them. It's
Yeah.
okay to be a little bit selfish in that sense with yourself, to put your needs first enough that you can then go out and give everybody else shit.
And
You know,
that's exactly why I came to TCW, because I was like, I'm not there. I can't. My mind was so shut off that I couldn't function. I was so I went into a freeze. They say fight, flight, or freeze. I was frozen for years, and it really was. Uh, I look back on it. I mean, I couldn't even. I don't know if you remember, but I couldn't even get in front of a camera. I was so locked in.
and you
You
were
know,
also very open there too. And so there was a lot that we learned.
yeah,
You were very open with us, and so one thing we can usually feel is that like we can feel that you're going through something. It's
right,
not that for different reasons everybody's got their different little radars, but we're never ever gonna know why,
yeah,
unless or until somebody tells us. And I think maybe it's freeing for people to say it. Everybody's going through something. We've learned and know that,
yeah.
right? And it's
Oh
it's
yeah,
it's a different level of heavy for different reasons. I've really had some students tell some stories that you step back and you're like, wow.
yeah.
And so, yeah, I'm glad to hear it helped, and that maybe it started you down a path of
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
coming
Well,
out of that funk.
yeah, course correction for sure. Well, and that's kind of why when I don't know, I told Heather, but I almost didn't come back that next day after I don't want to say failed, but we did the little like stage thing where I went up there and did the demonstration. And I crawled in the kennel. I knew I was doing everything wrong. And it was just like doing all these weird things. I locked into myself and I started self-doubt, and it just kind of perpetuated. And I just felt like such a small failure, or a large failure, and you know, so tiny. And then I thought, I was like, I went back to the hotel and I was like, and they did it on purpose. They knew I was gonna lock in. They knew they were like outing me and all this other stuff. I felt so attacked. And then I stayed up all night and I was like, what? All this anxiety, and I kind of dealt with myself and I said, well, how would they really have known? Like I started being realistic with myself. I said, there's no way they would have, known every little, like I had dad issues and he was a bigger guy and it's like all these things. And so I was like, no, I was like, I'm just gonna communicate, right? I'm gonna start with communication because I at that point I was so locked in and hadn't expressed myself. I think we were in fundamentals too at that point, and so I was like, okay, gloves are off. I'm gonna put down my sword that I was using as a shield and just be vulnerable. And I told myself I locked in. I think we had like 3 or 4 days left, and I was like, I don't care what the rest of this. I'm gonna go through it. I'm gonna listen. I'm gonna be open, and I'm gonna be vulnerable at the end and open to myself and open myself up for the first time. In besides my wife, no one had ever heard those stories, and so it was just kind of for me. It was freeing. It was liberating. It was very um I think the atmosphere you guys create there is very like it's so open that it allowed me to see that. And for like the first couple days I was like, oh, it's all part of a show, or that self-doubt. But by the end I was like, no, this is real. This is something profound, and that it isn't make believe or just some kind of like money scam or something. It truly was. You go into a dark place when you're self-doubt. And so yeah, it was very liberating. And we still talk. We have a group chat where some of those people in
Oh,
fundamentals
really?
too. Yeah, oh yeah, there's about 8 or 9 of us that still talk. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of relationships created. Like if you go on the Facebook page, there's a ton of relationships. I mean, if I look at a lot of what I see in any of the social media comments and so it's students from years back.
Right.
And so there's it, it's connective. You can see the difference from where we sit. Just that you guys riding together, going to catching rides with each other from the hotel to, and then talking about it and
Right.
sitting around having drinks when you get back, and everybody. It's like a shared experience.
Yeah,
You can
it's
see how you
certainly an
lift each other
environment.
up.
Yeah, yeah. And it's funny. I'm thinking about because it's not that I've tried to cultivate somewhat of that environment here, try to emulate that with me being a boss. I'm like, don't look at me as a boss. And when you fail, I ask myself, what am I doing wrong as a leader so that you can I never go, well, it's your fault. Now sometimes people just don't have the drive or they're not paying attention or they're just immature. But the ones that have stuck around, they've like, no, this is different. This isn't like a workplace, we're kind of like a little mini family. And I learned that there. And it was, I had businesses before, and I with the providing, and it was, I ran it differently because I thought I had to rule with an iron fist, and I was overcorrecting all the time, my staff and probably the clients too, they got some of it. And so they there was a lot of growth. But you're doing one in December, right? I think you have one down in Florida.
Yeah, we have one. We're expecting 50 students, which is it's a big one.
That sounds like a big one. Yeah.
Yeah, and the thing about that leading and the control thing, the biggest shift, and you'll feel it, maybe you're there, is that it's given to you versus you take it. So be it with people, be it with dogs, as you get better leading a group, the respect and everything you need is handed to you because there's an example there. And part of it, it's nice to hear, this a story behind what is happening, because we all really like each other as a group of people. We truly honestly have relationships and really really like each other. I don't talk to a lot of people, I'm not close with a lot of people, but I would call any one of them a close friend because I've known them for years and years. Yoa and Steve and Art, Lisa, all of them. And
Yeah.
I think we all, if we speak of each other, we speak highly in that regard. We're all different people. It doesn't mean we're all going to want to go on vacation together, but
Yeah.
we're all very, very aware of what our job is based around and the opportunity and the honor that it is. And that's what makes it, I think, kind of cool. I think people, at least this is what we've been told, people feel that they feel our relationship. They feel that as a group of trainers and as a group of people that are putting this event on, that we are all, as Cesar would say, in agreement with what we're doing, and we really like it. Nobody's there feeling like it's a chore or a drudgery.
Yeah, you could definitely feel that there. And I got to imagine you seeing all those. I mean, that was the first one post COVID, I believe, right? Because guys hadn't done it for a while, and you were all really excited to get back to
What
it.
year was it?
20, what was it, October 20? No, yeah, I graduated October 4th, 2021.
October
So
21. Yeah, so that probably was, we were just coming out.
yeah, that was like the first like official. We're worried about COVID still, and there was like
I don't think, yeah, we were getting mass conversations and stuff. I remember.
yeah, it was like done, but it wasn't. And
Yeah.
so, that was the first one you guys had in a while, and you could see the excitement, but also, yeah, you could definitely feel that there, looking back on it. But I think it's got to come from, just like when you train a dog, you've had, hundreds of those students come and go, and I'm sure you've heard stories. And so you've all bonded over these stories. You've all sat there and, kind of gone through it and go, oh yeah, this is, you've all kind of had that connection. So I got to imagine that brings a lot of that unity to the table when you're hearing about these stories of people, whatever the situation is. And so that, I mean, I know just from the ones that I'm doing one-on-one with my dog clients, that's profound for me. Yeah, I couldn't imagine doing an event setting like that where you're spending a couple of weeks with these people, and then hearing those stories and seeing who they are and how strong they are, or how weak they were versus at the end. And so that transformation's got to be powerful.
It is. It's an interesting perspective because you see different people go through it for different reasons and get different things out of it,
Yeah.
right? So you see dog trainers come through it with one idea, or you'll see just the dog owner come through it. Um, you'll see some people come through it like yourself, that you might have been brought there by the dogs, but your underlying motivation was a little deeper, right? You knew you needed something else, like you said, a path shift,
Yeah.
course correction,
Yeah.
and everybody ends up getting something. At least it seems like it. And we've had some pretty big changes. We've definitely had people go home and you don't stay with your spouse. You sell your business. You retire from the corporate world.
Yeah.
You go after that. You move to a different country. And the thing, if you're really into dogs, they're going to keep you honest about yourself, because you
Yeah.
can't. You got to be living some type of honesty. Otherwise, you're just going to get bit and fucked up all the time and have
Yeah,
a
oh
short
yeah.
career.
Yeah.
And that honesty is typically based on health on some level. I did a post with some dude named Sean Ellis. He raised he he raised wolves in a zoo and like it became like a pack leader to them, but he also lived with a pack of wolves as like a submissive member out in a wild pack.
Yeah, I've
And
seen that
he
guy.
has
Yeah.
stories. Yeah, he's got some stories that are
Uh-huh.
pretty cool. And what I like about the stories is they'll explain certain aspects, even in dog behavior, based on what was required of him at the moment. But I remember one thing, and I couldn't find it. I was actually searching for this little clip, but I remember him stating that when he first started the process, he ate like shit, and they would not accept him under those dietary conditions that he was feeding himself, and so he had to go to a very pure, strict diet of pretty much carnivorous type of diet because we emit so much of our smells through our, as you said, our cortisol level,
Yeah.
dopamine. I'm going to do a post on this. It's funny you're saying those things because these are underlying things people aren't aware of. Is that you're being motivated by things that are also feeding addictions. So
Yeah.
it's easy to fuck up with your dog because every time you pet them, your brain is being rewarded the same way it is if you do a line of coke. There's like dopamine that's being released, and for some people, and I'll go back to that underlying. If you really need your dog, that it's even a heavier hit. You're really getting something from that, and understanding those things becomes extremely important. Your dog is such a primal animal, being
Yeah.
motivated by survival. That as soon as you recognize that, everything actually kind of comes kind of simple down. And so the taking care of yourself, your dog really is an outcome of how you treat yourself.
Well,
And that's why I think all of us have known over time, begrudgingly or not, you got to really take care of yourself.
yeah, and I've noticed that, as people say, well, how can you be a hunter but an animal trainer? It's like, well, it's actually because of the respect of the animal in the beginning. I only bow hunt. And so when I grew up in a hunting family, I was it's very simple out there. You don't make sound. It's kind of uncanny how many parallels there are. You don't make sound. You're very still. You have to eat right. You have to actually wallow around. We actually don't go hunting for like the first 3 or 4 days. We acclimate to our environment. And so you
You're
do all
becoming
these.
the perfect predator.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, you're talking about,
You're having to get into the
yeah,
environment because what you basically have to become is what the deer is going to be looking at. Like,
right,
what is the deer going to be assessing? Because I need to make this deer dumb as fuck in relation to what I'm doing so that I have the upper hand. And when
right.
you're working with a dog, you're trying to say, what is this dog saying?
Yeah.
What is he saying?
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And it's, and then when you're talking about, so bow hunting in and of itself, if you shake even a little bit with your cortisol levels, that bow's going, 3 inches high, you miss the out completely. And so I shoot and train, consistently. There's a guy here in Eugene who he's like my other, I would say role model. His name's Cameron Haynes, and he kind of got me out of a deep funk before coming to you guys. I was in a darker place actually from when you guys saw me, and so I found out that through word of mouth and everything, my grandpa actually, his name's Fred Bear. He's a big time bow hunter, and my grandpa had a bow shop, a bait shop that he sold some of his stuff and everything. So come full circle, I'm out there wanting to learn. I actually wanted to learn like I wanted to be like a canine expert. I wanted to be at the sanctuaries in Colorado or Alaska, or I think there's one down in Florida even, where live with these wolves. Maybe not as in depth as some other people, but I wanted to be involved in the more like raw natural side of what it is to be to be a canine, to understand kind of how they work and function on a pack level. And so I've always kind of been drawn to the more animalistic side of dog training. And it all stemmed from that hunting, because you're talking about hunting something that has evolved to run away from cougars and wolves. And so you have to get into that. You have to step yourself into those shoes. And the success rate for elk and deer are like 20%. As a hunter, you're talking in Oregon, I think there's like 20 to 60,000 people that are going out there trying their chance and only a few get them, so it's really, you got to go deeper into the woods. You got to go where the elks and deer aren't pressured, and you got to just let go of everything. You can't bring your whatever from work the other day. That's all got to go away, because you won't ever see an animal if you're in that mindset. And so you really got to like channel. So that's where I started like really homing in on controlling my own energies. So, and it's really helped me refine and be a better dog trainer, unbeknownst to me at the time, and then come full circle. It's like, oh, right. But also it all kind of goes together. So it's been an incredible journey. And I'm just so excited to have this next chapter in my life, and to be able to train other people, and teach their dogs, and meet people like you and everyone there at TCW. And it's yeah, I couldn't be more happy with where I am with my life. And I think that's so important to be happy with yourself, and uh to have that kind of balance, because if you don't, then things can get sort of weird and funky real quick.
Well, if you're helping other things, it's hard to help other things if you're coming from a place of instability.
Right.
That's why the dogs struggle. They're coming from an unstable place, but they're trying to help their owners. They think they're doing their owners a service by telling them what to do, and trying to give them direction. So it's the same. You got to come from a place of, all right, I'm giving myself the honor of taking care of myself and making myself stable. And then I'm going to spread that out to those around me,
Yeah.
your family, your wife, if you have kids, and then your animals and your dogs, and your community. And you definitely have to start with a stable source.
And that's kind of like, I've taken on this mantle of, okay, I'm in charge of 9+ employees. I've got all these dogs. I came from a house of like 15 dogs actually, at one point. And so when you have, albeit not the most healthy or balanced relationship, but there was a lot of intricacies where I said, okay, what does this dog need? What does that dog need? And okay, this dog doesn't fit within this group. We need to rehome this one. And so I actually came into that I didn't adopt 15 dogs. I moved into that. And so we got it figured out and balanced out. And I think it's just effort, energy. I think one of the more fundamentals thing is um not importance, like actually putting the thought of saying something has to be done, something has to be
Intention,
changed.
intent,
Initiative, yeah, drive,
intention.
intention. There you go. That's what I was thinking of. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you got to have that intention of saying something's got to give somewhere, something's got to change, because with all my clients, even like with just basic obedience, it's like you're gonna have to put time into this. If we're doing board and train, this isn't just a okay snap, here's your perfect dog. Like you have to continue with it. You have to keep up with it. And I don't do board and trains for people who for example, like I compare it to like a workout video. I go, okay, if I'm a physical trainer, then there's two trains of thought in my head. There's the physical trainer that's there helping you every day, motivating you, whatever, or there's the at-home DVD. And I think the board and trains are like the DVD version. I think it requires higher discipline to do a board and train, because you'll see the dog better, you'll see all these things, and then I come in on the back end with this better dog. You can't then see the dog and go, well, he does it for you, but not for me. So, well, yeah, you got to build that relationship. You got to, yes, I make it easier. I've done all the heavy lifting, but you still have to, and kind of crushing those quarrels of like, it's not just a perfect, finished product when it comes back home. There's definitely some things that you gotta,
Of course, that's like the existential crisis of dog training right there.
yeah.
That being, you know, how much can we help? Depends. We can change a lot. Like I have a dog right now that I have completely altered,
Yeah,
and but it wasn't that it really needed much. It just needed things not there.
the right thing. Yeah,
Well, yeah, it needed the right thing, but it also just needed the other thing not there.
right,
Right. So,
right.
so the removal of a situation, or the removal of something unstable, can have just as profound an effect as doing something the right way for the dog. So the obviously, and the problem being is when it goes back, which is what you're describing. What is it going to take? It takes miracles sometimes.
Yeah, doesn't
Because you
it?
gotta also think of how many things do you know that you don't do,
Right.
right? How many things that you know are good for you, you don't do. That's
Yeah.
the thing to remember too, is that yeah, we put the effort in, and it's frustrating when the people don't necessarily put the effort in afterwards. But shit, I've ignored so much good advice in my life, and that way, at least I don't put too much pressure on the fact that we all do it. So
Exactly.
and a lot of your happiest clients do the least amount of work, oddly enough.
It does
And
seem that way, doesn't it?
of course, and,
Yeah.
and this is where the battle is what really frustrates us. And working with so many trainers over the years, this is the question that I've always been, I don't want to say entertained by, but I definitely know a trainer's trajectory by where you're at.
Yeah.
And we easily care too much in a sense. And then the question becomes why?
Yeah.
Like, what part of us is bothered? You don't live in the house. They gave you the money. They gave you a good review. Now, some of us, yeah, I do think it sucks sometimes to take a dog out of a funk that you kind of know it's going to go back into. It gets really tiring. So it's compassionate to feel bad for the dogs and so forth. You really have to learn to regulate how much of that you take in. I mean, as a caregiver, you know that you've done caregiving, and that's the part that the compassion fatigue that everybody talks about. But it's also ego beating because that doesn't we have a high success rate, but not really like we personally do. Like
Yeah.
my success rate of touching a dog is excessively high, but what is the true success rate of, and what is your expectation of what a client gets? So we're always battling those things. It's not easy, and that goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning of really regulating and taking care of yourself. So
We're not being overly prideful. I've had, in the beginning, it was always I'd send a dog there and then, or I'd bring a dog back home and then it would be, we do a tune up in a couple weeks or we do tune ups. And then a couple weeks later, they'd be doing their old habits, but the dog was not as good, but not as bad either. And I found that some people are able to live with some of the nuances. Like, case in point, there was this guy who he loved to play with ball, and if she takes it from him, oh, that's whatever. I don't mind it. Yeah, but that was actually causing a lot of boundary issues, right? Because then it would like get into the garbage, do all this other stuff. But the habit stopped, but he still did that. But sometimes the dog would still and he's like, well, I'm still happy with it overall. It's just not as bad. And I'm like, okay. So the dog learned, this minutia in between. They kind of adapted
never as
to,
good as we will make it.
yeah,
I almost never, and I mean that's just something I've accepted a long time ago, and it's easy for me too because like I said, I just learned to accept it.
yeah. No, it was hard for me to go, but you paid for, and the dog was with me and never got in the garbage. You know what I mean? So it was hard for me to say, well, how does that reflect me as a trainer? And it doesn't. At the end of the day, it's their, like you had mentioned at one point, they come to daycare and they can be different as long as they're good, but when they pay for that change, you want to do it. And so yeah, it's tricky. It's the
It's the
you know
dance, man.
it sure is. It's interesting. So
Yeah. Well, very nice talking to you.
yeah, it's been fun. Yeah, I really appreciate you taking the time to, you got family, busy life, I'm sure, and I just appreciate you reaching out and talking. So
Absolutely. So we'll chat again soon, and see you guys.